So thinking about temperament, so that, whenever you're saying, oh yeah, I get this, try to bring in a situation and a child to mind, right? Why is the child so easily frustrated? My daughter does a version of that now at 12. Very, very rarely. And it usually has something to do with math. But it can also have to do with something she feels she knows how to do, and she does that sort of version of it. Why and why now? And these understandings of that's just the temperament she was born with. She was fiery, or really introverted, or what have you. Why? So Steve Porges' research is really interesting. We were all, if you're a self-regger, you have learned about polyvagal theory, and to some degree, and it definitely is a part of self-reg. It's one of the foundations of the research, I would say. But he did some really interesting work in 1994, which was a game changer. And it was where he was working in the NICU, and he was doing research. His research was always on heart rate variability. Before he got into polyvagal research, he studied heart rate variability. So that's where, if you're a runner, your heart goes real, you check your resting heart rate, you go for a run, and then you see how fast it comes back down. You see the variability, but also how fast it comes back down. Tells you, it's a sign of, it tells you about vagal tone. What he discovered was that all of the infants in the NICU that had the label that what you would call a poor temperament, so all of the things about, crying all the time, really, difficult to connect with, hard to soothe, all of the things that went with poor temperament. He realized, he went through his research, physiological research, that they actually had a poor sympathetic reflex. So this idea of low vagal tone, which is really significant. It means be careful before you go out and Google how to raise vagal tone, because there's a lot of people that have tried to take this and turn it into a business of some kind. And it's not as easy as some kind of program that you buy and you've suddenly, strengthened your vagal tone. But it is about the fact, the most important thing here, first of all, to me, the answer is self-reg, by the way. So that will help you with vagal tone. But what this is telling us, right, is that the babies, they have a dysregulated stress system. So they go into that cachystasis and they have no way to come back down even through the co-regulation and the soothing. They're not soothed. It's really key. This is linked to resilience. So the idea of, you can think of it as a spring. So resilience is that you can deal with the stress, right? And then you have to recover. I put self-reg step 5 here because self-reg is not just about coping and dealing with, step 3, recognizing stressors and reducing them. It's that restoration. It's one of the biggest things I think we're missing. And so infants have no way to come back down. So they become, it's all this limbic responses, right? So that is huge. So instead of trying to teach, if you think of temperament in infants, now apply it to the 4-year-old or the 8-year-old or your teenager, or, I have a friend whose mom, like Sienna, was colicky. And I have a friend whose mom who was colicky as well. And she asked her mom for me when Sienna was just an infant, how long her colic lasted. And her mom joked and said, it's still going, right? So, which is funny. And yet, if you think about that, it's this sort of idea that it's across, that it becomes part of this temperament, where this is telling us that there's a physiological problem, right? Out of balance. And it tells us it's a form of self-regulation, believe it or not. To be, what's looking like the poor temperament, right? It's a really maladaptive form of self-regulation, right? So, and how do we lay the layers for a child to eventually begin to soothe their own self, to notice, right? So it's a really interesting one, because it moves us away from just talking about temperament as something you were born with, right? To, certain traits you were born with because you're from a certain family with a certain last name, to even thinking about what happens in the early years, to this gap in between, which is the stress response system. the brain, the body, and all of the things that connect us, and this vagus nerve, which is connected to everything in our body. I mean, babies with poor temperament in the NICU also have digestive problems. They have all of those things connected to the older unmyelinated part of the vagus nerve, which is connected in older kids and teens to the brown brain, right? So huge links.